Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this morning's session entitled Navigating the Road Ahead, Addressing Road Safety Challenges and Opportunities in the Era of Emerging Technologies and Mobility Trends. My name is Christopher Harrison. I head the IP Analytics section at the World Intellectual Property Organization in Geneva. And the World Intellectual Property Organization is a specialized agency of the United Nations responsible for intellectual property and innovation ecosystems. And innovation is a key part of driving future technology trends, and WIPO is committed to supporting innovation ecosystems around the world through the development of intellectual property policies and allowing an environment for innovation to flourish. And when it comes to talking about innovation and technology development, it's important that whilst the technology exists, we have the supporting ecosystem and framework to allow it to flourish. That involves having a system where there is regulations, standards, and policies in place that allow those innovations to flourish. And that is what we're going to be talking about in this morning's session. Talking about the new and emerging technologies and mobility trends affecting road safety and some of the opportunities and challenges that poses for the community. Before we get started with the panel discussion, I will like to invite Ms. Cecilia Sunnevang, Vice President of Research at Autoliv, to say a few words by way of scene setting. So, Ms. Sunnevang, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christopher, and good morning, everyone. So, we all know why we are here. We are here to achieve the goal of 50% reduction of the 1.2 million people who lose their life in our transport system every year. And we haven't really succeeded so far, so we have to do something different, and this is where the innovation that Chris introduced, talked about, is coming into the picture. But it is really complicated, and I think the scene here, being in Morocco, is showing the complexity that we have in our transport system, where you have multimodals, you have all the things from mopeds to bicycles to e-scooters, pedestrian, buses, tractors, horses. You have everything. And then you, of course, have cars and trucks. So it's complicated. And we also have different infrastructure. We have different traffic systems. We have different financial status or economical abilities. And what we all want in this complicated and complex situation is that we all want an accessible, effective, sustainable, and safe transport system. So why do we think that we can succeed now when we haven't done it before? And that is when the technology trends come in. I work for Autoliv. We're a supplier to the light vehicle industry, and there we have been developing safety products for 70 years. So we know also the challenges and the transformation that our customers are facing. So with the technologies now emerging like electrification or decarbonization, that also changes the whole architecture in the vehicles. So it's not only mechanical as it has been traditionally. Now it's much more about the computing power and the whole architecture, which in that sense also lead to that it's much more opportunities for connectivity. Because the car is now a computer, the computer is connected, and with connectivity and with computers, you can also have automation. And automation, of course, is then the self-driving capability. And all of this, in turn, also make it possible to do new business models. So this is kind of the scene setting that I'm thinking, that we have all this complexity, but we also have a lot of opportunities with electrification, automation, connectivity, and the new business models. And although we think automation will solve everything, I just want to make a caveat, and I think that we will discuss more here today, is that maybe not, because we should remember that more than 50% of the people killed in our transport system is not in a vehicle. They are on powered two-wheelers or pedestrians or outside a vehicle. And this also makes it that we have to utilize these technology trends for other transport modes. And here it might be also, I'm throwing in maybe a bit provocative, that here we also have a challenge on the financing side and relating to the other sessions here during the conference. Maybe this is where the road safety index or the private sector taking ownership of their value chain can also make a difference for the vulnerable road users and people that are not specifically in private-owned cars. So with that, that's my sort of setting the scene from a technological standpoint. Again, a lot of computing power, connectivity, cloud, all of this, and looking forward on going deeper into the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. And also, before we start with the panel discussion this morning, I would like to invite Maria Alonso to the floor. She is Autonomous Systems Lead at the World Economic Forum, and they have just released new WEF safety principles related to vehicle autonomy. And so Maria will come and explain what these new principles are, which helps also feed into the discussion that we're going to be having around autonomous vehicles. So Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you, everyone who's here this morning. As we are hearing, technology has the potential to reduce road deaths, but it's not technology alone. We need to make sure that we're leveraging technology in the right way. And this is going to be a lot of the points that we're going to hear this morning from our esteemed panelists. So how to make sure that we're able to leverage technology in the best way? And this is one of the points that the World Economic Forum is working on now, and the reason why at this Road Ministerial Conference we are launching 5 principles to ensure that we indeed get the safety benefits that we are hoping for from vehicle autonomy. So which are these principles? The first one is ensure that we've got strong safety behaviors throughout the organizations. It's not easy to make sure that we've got the vehicle autonomy. We all thought that that was going to be something simple, that we would go around the corner. And it's been 2 years, and 2 years, and 2 years, and 2 years, and still it's not there. So this difficult task, how do we make sure that all the organizations that are working in it are making sure that they've got strong safety behaviors? And it's not just the R&D, it's not just those engineers with the algorithms. It goes also throughout the organization. For example, when we think of sales, how do we make sure that those who are selling these vehicles have these safety benefits at the forefront and interest? The second one, it goes into the consumers. How to make sure that consumers have a well-informed understanding of their own responsibilities. And here it's extremely important when we're thinking about these first levels of vehicle autonomy, where it's more about assisting the driver and not leaving responsibility by themselves. How do we make sure that as an overarching industry, we provide enough education for those drivers, that people do not have to go into YouTube, as one of the panelists in a different panel was mentioning, to be able to understand these technologies? And how do we make sure that the advertisements of these technologies are not misleading into what the vehicle can and cannot do? The third one, it goes back into the industry. How can we have unified safety standards? We don't know what we cannot measure. So if we're really saying and having vehicles that are safer than all of us as humans, how can we make sure that we can prove it with numbers and that these metrics do not change per automaker? The fourth one is where also very important for this setting, which goes into collaborating, co-creating regulations with regulators. It is the industry who have the best know-how, especially important now that technology is advancing at an incredible pace. How can we make sure that we are co-creating and that we don't have a patchwork of regulations, which is something that UNECE is working towards. And the fifth one is something which is not visible, but extremely important, cybersecurity. Our vehicles are becoming machines. How can we make sure that all the industry have very high cybersecurity standards to make sure that these vehicles are operating in the way they're supposed to? So these are the 5 principles that the World Economic Forum is putting forward for the industry and for the entire ecosystem to make sure that we indeed improve road safety thanks to this impactful technology. Thank you so much, and I very much look forward to this engaging discussion from our esteemed panelists.
Thank you, Maria. So let me now introduce the panelists that we have on stage for this morning's session. I've already introduced Ms. Cecilia Sunavang, who's Vice President of Research at Autoliv. And as we go along the panel here, we're joined by Mr. Pankaj Agarwal, Chief Engineer of Roads at the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, Government of India. We have Mr. Yusuf Al-Hansali, CEO of Vintronics from the United Arab Emirates. We have Mr. Laurent Benoit, President of Conseil de Surveillance from UTAC, that's the French Automobile Union in France. Mr. Philip Turner, Head of Sustainable Development at UITP, the International Association of Public Transport. Mr. Li Wei, Deputy General Manager from China Automotive Technology and Research Center, CARTAC. And finally, Mr. Dimitri Miryasin, Deputy Executive Secretary from the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, UNECE. So it's a pleasure to have such a great set of panelists for this morning's session. So let's dive right into the topic, talking to start with, following on from what Maria said, about autonomous vehicles and what this future could look like and how we actually think about getting there, in terms of some of the opportunities that it opens, but also some of the challenges. So I'd like to start by directing my first question to Mr. Agarwal, and that's in terms of how can some of these emerging technologies, like the autonomous vehicles, contribute to actually reducing deaths and other serious injuries on the road. So Mr. Agarwal, please.
Thank you. So first of all, I would like to put the context of developing countries actually. If you see, India is a country of population of 1.4 billion with 3.2 million square kilometer of area and 6.3 million kilometer of road network. Out of that, and different types of vehicles ranging from bullock cart to the high-speed corridors. Only 2% network carries about 40% transport. And besides that, we have some of the connected roads which are not following the standards. So this is a big challenge, and lane discipline and the user behavior is again a very big problem in India. And we have abandoned cattle. Last year, 2,000 cattle died on the roads. So as far as autonomous vehicle is concerned, I feel that autonomy is very, very at nascent stage, and we are struggling because the perception model developed by the autonomous vehicle, they have some standard object perception model, and we are working on, we want the abstraction model. There is a difference in that they identify some 24 or 25 vehicles, and they train their computer or autonomous system on that particular object's identification and maneuverability. But in India, we have identified as much as 94, and a lot more are coming in. And during the harvesting season, we have some over-dimensional bullock cart, agriculture produce tractor, trolleys. So I feel it's a big challenge if autonomy is to be think as a solution for the road safety. I come out with an idea that it's a shared responsibility. So first of all, if you have the triangle of mobility, the vehicle and the driver, another is the infrastructure, and third is the environment in which you are operating. So infrastructure is a related thing we can improve, we can invest money, but what about the environment, what about the lane decision, user behavior? And autonomy sees it that we are shifting the responsibility from other to the vehicle. And this should be, as Celia rightly pointed out, and Maria also pointed out, we have to see to what level the safety we can achieve within a given setting condition and the environment. The trends are emerging. We are also trying for that. Level 1 assistant to the driver we are already providing. And commercialization safety has to be commercially driven. Otherwise, nobody will ask for the safety. From that perspective, if you divide the safety during the crash, before the crash, and after the trauma care, so autonomy is basically working for prevention of crashes. And crash worthiness is working on the basically what happens during the crashes. So we have already launched a new car assessment system where the user has been given the rating that these are the 5-star vehicle, this is the 4-star vehicle, and consumer preferences. And through a survey, we found that people prefer safe vehicle if they can pay money for that. And some people, if they don't have enough money, so he can have the right choice of 2-star rating. But such kind of rating is not available in the autonomy because they do not have extensively researched. And they should come out such kind of ratings. These are the technology. It has clocked 100,000 kilometers or 200,000 kilometers under a particular condition, like developing country like India. And they come out with their own rating, and so that they can say, if you want to avoid the crashes, this is the rating we are giving based on some data, evidence-based data. And if that is a solution, that it can be taken up by the country, and the people, it will become a consumer-driven and commercially viable. On the third side, on the micro-mobility in the public transport system, the people are using that, and we are also using on the sustainability part of it, the battery as a services and the electric vehicle as a services. All data is coming in, and people are ready to pay for that. So autonomy should not be, it should be optimized based on the particular set of variables, rather than it's a one-cut solution for all the countries. That's it I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to direct a similar question now to Mr. El Hansari, which is, we've talked a little bit there about autonomous vehicles and some of the challenges of how we transition towards autonomous vehicles. What are some of the challenges that the industry faces as we move from a situation with assisted driving that we have at the moment and moving towards more fully autonomous systems, where we have this transition period over the next few decades to come? How does that impact the road safety as people begin to learn how to develop and make use of these assisted tools within the vehicles?
Thank you for inviting me. Just let me spend a few words about the severity of the situation and why we are gathering here. So, we're talking about losing our 4,000 lives every day. So, it's equivalent to almost 10 of Airbus 380 that are crashing down every day with absolutely zero survivors, And when we have an aircraft crash, so the whole world is shaking, the news. But what's happening? So there are 10 of those airplanes are crashing down, and we need to change our perceptions about the severity of this problem. Yeah, so why we need the autonomous vehicles? Just because the human driver was incapable to handle this problem. So according to reports published by the WHO, so 1.3 million people are losing their life. And the drivers are blamed for 94% of the crashes. That means if we remove the human driver from the driving equation, then we'll solve the problem. So, these computers are capable to solve the problems. I think the technology is ready today. So I'm interacting with a lot of colleagues from the car industry. But the problem we have today is the mixed traffic. So if we have, if we can replace the whole fleet of these cars, I think we will really reduce these problems close to zero. This is for sure. But we have today 3 billion vehicles globally. So just in order to replace them, we need another 100 years, just in production time, despite the fact that we have enough raw materials. So I think, so we have the technical capability and the moral obligation to solve the problems if we work together from the industry and the regulations. I just had a small talk with my colleague from France, and he told me, so just taking out the French part, and the Americans are doing their own regulations, and Asia the same. I mean, this is really a place where we have to have a common regulation, common sense, you know? So the problems that are facing the evolving of these cars, some of them are technology, like the cybersecurity. It's becoming an issue because these cars can be really manipulated for criminal purposes, for example. But we have another problem called the social dilemma of self-driving cars. So we have to write algorithms for these cars, but we will face problems in case the car has to take decisions. Imagine, so you have a car is driving, and then suddenly there were some kids playing on middle of the road, and the car has to choose between hitting a tree or hitting the kids. So this is a moral problem. Nobody can solve it. Nobody can solve it. So we will be dealing with these problems definitely in this mixed traffic for many, many years to come. I think by encouraging the people to use the advanced driving assistance systems, that could solve really half of the problems. We need to do more awareness about the destruction, you know, the maturity of driving of the people is reducing year after year. People are distracted by their phones, by their own problems, and that is something we have to fight immediately. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And one of the interesting points that you raised there that I'd like to explore in a bit more detail was around, is the technology ready? And one of the challenges that I read is around the different environmental conditions that exist around the world in different parts. And as a Brit from the United Kingdom, like, we get a lot of rain in the UK, and this can have a big impact on the sensors used in these autonomous vehicles, and other parts of the world face other challenges, whether it be fog, whether it be ice, whether it be sand. So I'd like to throw the question out to the panel around how do we look at some of these emerging technologies where these sensors are causing issues, and is the technology really ready, and should we be really pushing autonomous vehicles as a solution now if the technology is there or not? And I'd like to ask any of the panelists if they'd be wanting to pick up on that question. Cecilia.
Yes, so thank you for the question, but I just want to comment one thing that you mentioned before, that I think that saying that 95% of the problem is the driver. It's a very simplified way of looking at it. So I think we should be careful when we use that number. That said, is the technology ready? I don't think so. And I think it's what we heard Marie saying around the 5 principles. They are extremely important because in some cases we are actually using the transport system today as a lab. We have vehicles where the systems today are used in an unintended way. We have seen field operational tests where people are putting the autopilot on 20 kilometers above the speed limit, then they recline the seat and they play video games on their phone. And that is with systems that we have today. So I say that let's continue to gather the data, analyze the data, keep to the evidence-based structures that we have been working with for a long time, and also help the emerging stakeholders that don't have a history of traffic safety. We need to get new stakeholders into this forum so they understand the safe system approach and what we have done and how we approach this topic. And finally, I would say that one enabler to actually get to fully automated driving, which I think that we will someday, is to have a level of safety for the occupants that we have today. So obviously having the minimum requirements or even the consumer testing to make sure that things will happen, and when they happen, people are not injured or killed. So thank you.
Bonjour, je vais parler en français.
Shift to French. I am representative not of France, but an international company that is working on regulation, on inspection. So I'd like to backpedal on what has been in emerging countries and we need to have vehicles that are reliable and sure. If cars are not equipped with the systems that are appropriate, then this is going to lead to quite many havocs and accidents. And so we need to have a vehicle that is quite reliable. And then from the with regard to regulation, you need to have a specific authority that is going to monitor, and we need to carry out the inspection of these vehicles on an ongoing basis. And so the fleet of cars in the street, then right after we're talking about autonomous vehicles, and so autonomy is follows a gradual approximation approach. 2.25 and beyond, this is quite complex. And so helping people to drive, braking instantly, particularly does have an impact on injured people. And so when we're dealing with 3 and 5 grades, then we need to increase reliability. We need to work on simulation particularly, and this is quite complex, a task to shoulder. And as we have seen in car crashes on American roads, there are people who trust the technology, and so they thought they were dealing with autonomous vehicles. Unfortunately, it's the other way around. And so the 4, 5 will only be accessible under accurate conditions, and it's not going for it's not going to be for tomorrow. We need to have reliable roads and vehicles, and we need to have vehicles adapted to these roads. Thanks very much indeed for your understanding. Back to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Just when I use the 94%, it's not my words, that I'm just using the last publications, because it's a science. When it's science, it's about proving. I totally agree with you. This is over-exaggerated, what I believe as an engineer, but we need someone really to do some deeper work and publish it. This is science. You cannot, once it's published, it's immune. We cannot just reject it. Yeah, so when I say the technology is ready, it's in general. So the situation we achieve with the self-driving cars, it's definitely better than human driver today. But of course, in perfect driving conditions, not in the mixed traffic. In the mixed traffic, totally believe that we will face even more problems. Sorry, thank you.
I just wanted to say a few words about the science and the art. The driving is science and art both. Anything which human uses involves a bit of science and art. So if you train the people for driving, but there are certain principles around which you train him. The basic application of science is an art in itself. So training the vehicle on and having the scientific evidence in a particular conditions may or may not be right for the developing countries. As I already, it has been pointed out, we have a 180 million two-wheelers and out of 340 million total vehicle populations. So, and different kinds of animal drawn and everything, and non-standard roads, no road markings, anything, potholes, poor maintenance sort of a thing. And besides that, the weather, we have a rainy season of 4 months. So it should be definitely not taken as a panacea that it will solve all the problems. So it should be at a level that it should aid the people. We should trust the people first, and their role should not be eliminated at all. And it should be used as an aid, assistance to him, that he should take the better decisions. And as far as the trust of technology is concerned, it will come with the evidence only. If in a particular condition, if you have the right data showing that really this technology can work under such circumstances and the condition, the people will adopt it, and people are ready to pay it. That's it.
Thank you. Could I direct the next question to Mr. Li Wai? As a research center in autonomous technologies in China, what lessons are you learning around how these autonomous vehicle systems can help to reduce fatalities on the road? Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, a briefly introduction of CATAC. CATAC is China Automotive Technology and Research Center. We do automotive technology regulations, standards, and we do think tanks for central government. We do CNCAP. We do certification and testing, etc. So looking forward, all of you seeing in CATAC in Tianjin, China. And the question Meditor asked me, I will introduce my institute. Our meaning, emergency technologies such as autonomous driving will bring new challenges, such as the performance of sensors under harsh conditions, system hacking, and legal liability issues during the transition period of human-machine hybrid vehicle. To address these issues, necessary regulations and infrastructures reform are needed. For example, to promote the global standardization of autonomous function safety, advance global information security technology, and establish effective new laws and ethics for human-machine hybrid vehicles. So our target is actively promoting management and common technology innovation in China. For example, we have promoted the release of the National Standard System for Intelligent Connected Vehicles and planned the complete intelligent safety system. Another example, we have established a database on China in-depth traffic accident research. We call it CDAS. and a database of typical automotive information security vulnerable in China, providing continuous policies and technical support to China. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next question to Philip. So there's many instances of autonomous vehicles being deployed in the public transport sector, and many different use cases where they've been used for a while, especially on some of the, not on roads, but on rail and in safe spaces, whether that be around campus environments or airports and the like. So my question is, what can the automotive industry learn from what has been seen in public transport in terms of the deployment of autonomous vehicles to help reduce some of these incidents? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Just a little bit of background about UITP. We represent city transport authorities, public transport operators, but also the business supply chain, but also anything to do with collective transport in cities. So I'm no engineer, so I'm most probably going to come at this as a very, very different sort of angle from the rest of the panel. Be that by design, I don't know. But I think going back to your earlier question about are we ready for all of this? I mean, in the public transport sector, it's such at an early stage. You know, only small demonstrations, really. It's in a big city. It's not ready. Let's put it bluntly. And I don't really see it being ready for a while. And I think we need to remember these things are tools in order to achieve your policy goals. And I think we kind of sometimes lose sight of that when we're talking about this, because we go into the nitty-gritty and forget all that wider objectives. And I think when you're looking at autonomous vehicles, I think there are massive risks. I mean, if you're going for a one-for-one replacement, and we're going to have 1 billion more cars on our roads, that's not going to deal with the problems we have now. We're going to have massive congestion, and that's really going to hurt our economies. And I think we forget that. And I think the other thing is that there is also the nightmare scenario, and I'll give you my little personal life here. I mean, if an autonomous vehicle picked up my daughter to go to school, came back, picked up my wife, came back, and then you've got so many wasted kilometers if you're doing it that way. But I think where the opportunity is when you combine that in a shared model. And studies have shown if you do that, you can actually reduce vehicle kilometers by 80%. And for me, the important thing about that is that frees urban space that can be used for other things. Cycle paths, you know, pavements, green spaces, making your city better. And I think this is how we've got to look at these technologies. But really, that's only going to work in this kind of combined model if you've got a solid public transport backbone as part of this in your city. And I think people really forget public transport role in this whole road safety agenda. You know, you see figures that public transport is up to 60 times safer than cars. If you look at transit-oriented cities, it's 5 to 10 times safer than a car-oriented city. And if you doubled the share of public transport in your cities, you can cut road traffic fatalities by half. So I think we really need to look at those opportunities around this from a policy point of view, kind of where I come from. So looking at it increasing efficiency, looking at first and last mile integration, connectivity. And I think, again, going back to the basics, you know, we're in an early stage, it's in the future, but we have to deal with the problem right now. If you look at the Sustainable Development Goals 11.2, it talks about addressing road safety through expanding public transport. That is the exact wording for cities. And if you look at the performance of that, only 50% of the urban population has convenient access to public transport. So that's roughly 2.2 billion people globally. We need to address that, for me, as a priority, and really increase that mode share. Because really, all these things are a tool to achieve a more sustainable model of mobility in our cities. And I think we need to keep that in mind when we're looking at these technologies.
Thank you. And I'd like to pick up on that theme there around shared mobilities and change of moving away from the model that has existed for so long around personal car ownership and what some of these other new business models and access to mobility looks like. So, Dimitri, I'd like to come to you and ask a bit about shared mobility and whether that be things like ride-hailing services or car short-term hire services that exist. Like how do we look at introducing better regulations to minimize some of the safety risks in shared mobility? Thank you.
Thank you, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I'm representing the UN Economic Commission for Europe. You may know that we are, among other things, hosting the UN's global regulatory hub for land transport. We're doing exactly what ICAO does for aviation and IMO does for maritime. So when you're driving a car today, you are in all likelihood using many dozens of vehicle regulations hosted by UNECE. And I think this is the starting point. And before I get to shared mobility, let me just share a few perspectives on regulation of autonomous vehicles. You know, there is a story to tell here, and it starts from the fact that, first of all, there is, you know, a very long experience of regulating both driving and vehicles before they became connected, and then eventually before they become autonomous. We have been working on this for 60 years, and we've learned a lot on how you do and you don't do regulation. And I'm very pleased to say that most of the panel members today are active participants, themselves or their organizations, in the work of the regulatory bodies of the UN, primarily the Working Party 29, the World Forum on Harmonization of Vehicle Regulations. Now, 10 years ago, we had the foresight to warn everybody that the industry, the various policymakers from various regions of the world, and civil society have to work together to create a regulatory regime for autonomous vehicles. Well, it was not necessarily, you know, that call wasn't necessarily heeded 10 years ago, but today I'm pleased to report to you that finally all major stakeholders are coming to the same table, and we have US, China, India, European Union, Japan, Korea, Australia, South Africa leading this work at the UN platform. Now, what we've done so far on regulation. The Vienna Convention on road traffic has been amended twice already, and it already reflects the realities of automation. So you should know that. Traffic rules, it's governed by UN Convention, already reflects automation as a possibility. The vehicle regulations have gone through 3 waves of amendments to reflect the potentiality of the 5 levels of automation that we all know about. There is no level 4, level 5 vehicles anywhere on the road. No. Whoever tells you the opposite is probably not true. But we have a very, very important recent development. In September last year, there is a regulation adopted on driver control assistance systems, DCAS, which is dealing with level 2, which is primarily what we're talking about when we're talking about so-called, you know, autonomous vehicles. They're not autonomous, they are actually assisted. And this really changes things because we have now a way to generalize advanced driver assistance systems. And I think we need to pause and realize that this is in itself a very valuable development, because it will take years before automation becomes reality on the streets. But we have these systems already regulated and already today able to reduce fatalities and injuries in the human-operated cars. So assisted driving has become much more advanced because of the automation hype, because of the extra attention, And I think this is a very positive development. We have many other things happening. I will not go into all the details, but safety is becoming a focus, and cybersecurity is in focus as well. Regulation 155, adopted in 2020, on cybersecurity of all connected vehicles, already includes autonomous vehicles as a potentiality. So what we are doing today is we're designing regulations for the future. We're for the first time actually introducing strategic foresight into regulatory work for vehicles that nobody has seen and nobody can fully imagine, because there are several unpredictable elements there. And the key challenges are, first, how will humans interact with the machine, right? Will there be a new revolution of AI solutions that will actually reimagine the vehicle as such? Where will the brain be located? Right now, all solutions, most of them, the brain is in the vehicle. But in fact, there is another option. Brain is in connectivity hubs, and then there is a brain everywhere, which is, if you read the MIT Technology Review, that's what they think will happen in the next 50 years. Low middle-income countries adoption. Of course, for most of low middle-income countries, what we're talking here today is very far off, but they can benefit already today with improved technology in human-operated vehicles, these so-called sub-products of innovation. For example, acceleration control for pedal error is a very specific innovation that is being deployed in low-income countries. And finally, of course, we need, and I fully agree with Philip, a complete redesign of our cities to eventually accommodate autonomous vehicles, but more importantly, to use automation correctly. And ride-hailing services and public transport more generally, in our view, will be the most important opportunity. We need not imagine a city with every one of us watching a Netflix movie in a personal vehicle 20 years ago. This would be horrible from all points of view. And those of you who will hear, oh, but these will all be electric vehicles, so there will be no carbon emissions. Well, we all know, and that could be another topic for another panel, electric vehicles come with a lot of cost to the environment, as we all know, including emissions. So we need to be very, very careful what we're visioning. In our view, the ride-hailing services and public transport more generally is where automation needs to be applied, and would like to work with all of you to make sure that the regulation also goes in that direction and that it doesn't unnecessarily advance personal-driven vehicles going forward. So city redesign regulation is just as important as vehicle redesign regulation. And that's where we need to join forces with those who are imagining the future of cities, because if the city is walkable, if it's a 15 or at least a 30-minute city, the role of autonomous vehicles will be very different compared to what we imagine it today. Thank you.
Thank you. Some really excellent points there. So I'd like to extend the opportunity for other panelists to pick up on this point around regulation for autonomous vehicles and shared mobility. So who else would like to pick up on this topic? Mr. El Hansari? Yeah, good.
All right. I just want to add something to the inputs. I really love it and like it, honestly. But so I'm living in Dubai, yeah. So if you visit Dubai in August, you can ride a bicycle, you can walk in the city, just because of the temperature and really the conditions are not for outside, not for outdoor. Yeah. So the car today is the most expensive underused asset in the world. That's a fact. And those cars, autonomous cars, are not made for retail, in my opinion. It is made for shared mobility. These cars will be equipped with very expensive sensors that make them very expensive. They are not affordable. It won't be in the next 50 years even, you know? So that's that fact. I think we have to change the mindset of the next generation, not the thing to own a car at all, yeah? And think about the shared mobility. We are facing problems, this is a fact, but we cannot make a U-turn now. So there have been billions of dollars spent to really solve these problems, and many companies are doing tests. Hundreds of millions of miles are already done successfully. We are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. This is for sure. The electrification of the cars is very important. You know, it's not only the car safety is a concern, but also the greenhouse emissions. It's killing even more people than accident, which is really not another aspect that we have to reconsider. So I think our vision is one, and we share the core belief that by joining our efforts and working together between the car industry and regulations over the globe to define standards. Today there is no standards that fits for all. You know, if you go to the US, you have traffic regulations from state to state that are completely different. You know what I mean? I think this is really a big issue, and there is a lot of work that to be done from you guys. So without you, we would have this success. That's my small input on it. Thank you.
Just one comment on this. I fully agree. The opportunity we have is that for the first time, the two, you know, the world is divided when it comes to, you know, regulation on vehicle safety, both traffic rules and vehicles. The US has its own system in a few countries, and Europe has its own system. Now, for the first time for autonomous vehicles, we are designing a single system, a bridge. And that is reassuring. On the vehicles, it's happening. On autonomous driving rules, no. And we are seeing significant bottlenecks there, precisely because of the issues you mentioned. But we have an opportunity there.
Thank you. Laurent, please.
I'd like to add that when we talk about the shared mobility, we need, this means also that you have the capacity to change vehicles in order to move around, and so you need not get lost, because we are talking about autonomy. When then we have the interface human being machine, how do you know that the vehicle that you are driving is, and the signals that is emitting that you are on the right path? And so the regulation has a major role to play in this field. In Europe, we have been able to create the GSR2, which is at a very level, a technological level of content technological that helps in driving. But there is the uniforming. Each one, regardless of the car brand that he's going to use, really being GSR2, he's going to know what it means, such a warning on the command, and he will be able to move from one vehicle to another and transfer. So shared mobility is this way is going to be, but this can be extended to the global level, and it's quite important to enhance the safety, and so we need not lose sight of our users and take them on board. Thank you.
And Mr. Li Wai, you mentioned earlier that you're heavily involved in regulations within China. So I wonder if you could say a few words on this, and maybe also some of the infrastructure challenges that are required to get these autonomous vehicles into place. Thank you.
Sure. And in China, you know, the traffic condition is very complexity. And you know, two-wheelers, pedestrians, and you know, some trucks and some passenger cars. So the infrastructure is, I think, the function is not belong to the MIIT, but belong to the MOT. So the central governments should connect it and communicate together to get the target. But it's very difficult for them to cooperate together very well. You know, different field, different region, so it's a big challenge for China, especially in the second level, third level cities. Pedestrian, I think, is all there is not so good. they don't have the good behavior. So maybe in the metropolitan is okay, but the low-level cities, I think, is very difficult. So there are a lot of things we should do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And at the World Intellectual Property Organization, where I work, we have just released a new report looking at the future of transportation from a technology and innovation perspective. This is a new report that was only released 2 weeks ago, and one of the report covers many different aspects of road safety within it, so I would encourage you all to take a look. It's very much looking at it all from a technology perspective. But one of the things that we see more and more through the patent filings and what's innovations that are being filed is this lots of new developments in this gap between what I would describe as between the bicycle and the car. These new modes of transport that are not quite cars, but they're more than just a bicycle. And I think this is kind of builds on what we've seen in cities over the last 10 years with e-scooters becoming prevalent, and there's potentially big road safety issues attached with all of these new, they're basically, as I see them, new modes of transport, because they're not one or another, they're this in-between thing. So I'd like to discuss this topic of these new vehicles that are in between modes of transport and what we need to do from a road safety point of view to embed them. Laurent, please.
Oui, je voulais intervenir sur les...
Wanted to intervene on the e-scooter in Paris. There was just 2 years ago, the e-scooters were made available by supermarkets, and so because the users really they did anything that cropped up their mind, and so there was no rule. They hurt pedestrians with the e-scooters, and so this way of mobility is really considered as a way of engaging in leisure activities in order for the e-scooters to be used efficiently. Then rules and regulations have to be made rigorous, particularly we need to regulate e-scooters in more accurate way. People can live together, but we need to share the city. There are quite a lot of work that is being carried out in order to specifically establish lanes for e-scooters and for pedestrians and so. But when we are left with no choice, then you can work on the design and architecture of the city for sharing the spaces among the community members, but then it's quite a lot of problems. Philip.
Yeah, just kind of picking up on that point. I think it's, we all know that public transport can't fill every single journey, and you do need, these first and last mile issues. But I think that when they're very well coordinated, you can actually see a modal shift of up to 30%. So, but I think really it is this whole challenge about how to integrate it within the system and provide that alternative to a vehicle. And I think you've got to look at it at really different aspects. And I think one of the key bit is that infrastructure. We have mobility hubs based around public transport areas, which I think is so important for that integration. And I think, there is this challenge about, don't compete, don't steal. And I think that's quite a difficult one to ensure that coordination. And I do think you need a governance structure within a city really to manage that relationship. I think also there is the challenge of aligning business models. I mean, we do see a lot of these smaller companies go bust, frankly, and they do need the public transport sector to provide that sufficient foot flow for them to have a viable business model. And I think they really have to understand that as well. So you can get those win-win developments. And I think when you have also the regulations enforced around safety regulations, so on and so forth, you can actually see the impact on vehicle kilometres in a city. ITF, I think, measured it down by 23% in cities. So it really has to be integrated, I think, within, you know, smaller urban space. I think it's also important for urban planning guidelines. And I think it goes back to kind of my point earlier. We need to work towards that shared goal. In order for it to work, you have policies like sustainable urban mobility plans that everyone can sign up to, which everyone's going into the same direction. Digital services can facilitate that. So I think we need to look at beyond regulations and really focus on this collaborative approach from integrating infrastructure, technology, enforcement, but also public awareness as well.
Yes.
And talking about, maybe spinning on that, Philip, and almost a question to you, because what I find fascinating is that these in-between modes or even the e-scooters, they are, of course, from a safety standpoint, extremely challenging. But on the other hand, I don't think we can take them away because it's so easy and it's you know, you don't have the congestion, you don't have, it's a lot of easiness over it. So almost like a question to you, but maybe this micromobility and the shared mobility can actually be the enabler for why we have the discussion on the new city planning or not designing a city around the car. So it's almost like, not a revolution, but at least a wave of challenging the car-centric design. And I think this is very important when we talk about the low and middle income countries that do not leapfrog into fully automated vehicles one-on-one as we have today, but really take India as an example. If you develop a new city center, then think about how will people actually move and then design the infrastructure and your system around that instead of saying, well, we need a boulevard and then we need a roundabout and then it will be congested. So I think it's super interesting to see where the future goes with this shared mobility. And of course, it is difficult to regulate because, I mean, we have an issue today. We don't regulate bicycle helmets to a larger extent. So it has to be, again, awareness and design. I really believe that.
In India, we have e-scooters, but these are offered as services also. On the private space, we have a approved type design the manufacturer is doing, but on the services part of it, there are certain private operators which are offering as a public transport to them, and also they are getting approved from the regulator, the type design approved. Some brand name like Yulu, they offer e-cycle. And what is the point here, that if it is an organized sector, I think there is no problem in offering any product. You can regulate the company. If it is in a private space, definitely you have a trouble. And so if you introducing any kind of share mobility or micro mobility transport system through a corporate or through a entity which is sharing the responsibility, I think it will be popular among the public and they will use it as a services. It's about the format only.
I just want to address very, very important points here. The car industry, I found that each company are working on their black box in terms of safety. That's a big problem. I don't know how far the regulators are involved in the development of these cars now. The Chinese are doing their own stuff, the Western, they are doing their own stuff, and I don't think it's a place of a competition rather than a place of collaboration, you know? So, because we are going into a level that the car will be, or the criteria to buy cars is the safety aspect. And in my opinion, safety is not something that we negotiate. Safety is safety, you know what I mean? So I don't know how we can find a middle ground that these companies, regardless if it's from China or US or Europe, that they are working together in the same black box. Because safety is not something that we negotiate. So we'll not buy a car that has the probability to kill me less or more. I don't know if you have a comment on it.
Dimitri, please.
I'll be happy to hear it.
Well, we're working on it. All major car manufacturers are part of this work. So it's BYD, Tesla, Volkswagen, and I could list 20 other companies, so no prejudice to others. We have an issue, though, because right now, as you know, in the US and Canada, there are three major issues right now. Hands-off, the so-called hands-off, the system-initiated maneuver, when the machine decides to change lanes, for example, right, not you, and then differentiating an urban setting and a motorway. So right now, in the United States, hands-off is possible, not regulated. It's a system-initiated maneuver is possible both in an urban setting and on a motorway and not regulated. Okay? And this is where we get most of our data from, because it's been happening in the US. In China, the motorway system-initiated maneuver is actually harmonized with the newest UNICE regulation, the DCAS, which I mentioned. So that means that a large number of assisted vehicles in the future autonomous vehicles will be harmonized. We're working with the United States and with the US manufacturers, including Tesla, which sends a very big delegation to every meeting of the respective intergovernmental body to make sure that they eventually integrate these regulations as well. So it's not easy, but it's happening. Regarding micromobility, the approach regulation has been taken that any assisted or autonomous vehicle will have to make sure it minimizes negative impact to vulnerable road users. So this is a principle of regulation. That includes bikers, and e-scooter users. Now, the concern, of course, is when it's the machine that decides to make a maneuver. This is the critical point, and we don't have enough data yet how the vehicle and the micromobility users will interact. So that's a concern, needs to be watched, and I use this opportunity to say every micromobility user has to use a helmet, and a UN regulation, proper helmet that actually protects head from injuries. And I think there is no alternative to doing this, no matter how smart, how autonomous, how intelligent the systems are. Because if one falls, one falls. And we, for now, are still living organisms. Who knows what happens in 50 years? Maybe we'll be assisted as well in many ways. But for now, helmet use for micromobility is probably one of the most important safety measures one can take.
Thank you. And one of the points you mentioned there, Dimitri, was around data. And obviously, any autonomous or connected transportation system, data plays such a key part in it. And Maria mentioned this earlier when she was talking around cybersecurity being one of the safety principles that WEF is talking about. So I'd like to talk a little bit more now about data and the good and the bad of data. So the benefits that data can bring in terms of connecting these modes of transport together with smart city systems, and the benefits of data sharing, and some of the challenges that data plays on the other side in terms of from a cybersecurity point of view, and how bad actors could do dangerous things from a safety point of view with data of autonomous vehicles. So who on the panel would like to pick this up first, please? Let's talk around data. Cecilia, please.
I can comment on the good things, and we heard before Katark mentioning SIDA. So we have relied for many years, or the history in the collection of real-life data, because we need to be evidence-based in the sense that we really know how people are injured in the transport system, how we can replicate it in a laboratory setting, and how we then can develop the right tools and methods that will go into a regulation or a consumer information. And I mean, looking into the retrospective data, that's basically how we have come to the scenarios we have today. But it takes time, and it's of course a lot of work. So the very first opportunity that we have with the real-time collection of a lot of data is that we can understand quickly what happened in a crash, or even if we have a near crash or around people's behavior. So it opens up a completely new way of understanding the real life situations in a better way. That of course puts requirements on collaboration and how we collaborate around data, and there again, maybe not from a cybersecurity, but from a GDPR or personal information standpoint, it's a bit tricky. But for sure, this open up for a lot of more qualitative information in how we can continuously update the regulation and consumer informations. And also I see it as an opportunity in the low and middle income countries where we don't have this detailed data. And there is so that's the biggest opportunity from my perspective.
Of course, data is very important, and so we are jointly with some partners in the traffic predictions, Professor Dr. Atif, and it's very crucial for the future. If you can predict with a high accuracy where accident can take place and how often, I think this is very important. By using AI today become very powerful, and I think we have to take into consideration to involve the AI more and more in the predictions. This is very important. That is something more or less new, but that is something we have to explore more and more and really take it seriously. Yeah.
One thing I would like to share about the data, that we face challenges in the private space, not in the public transport, because there is an issue of privacy. People don't want to share their data. So that is the biggest issue in collecting the data. On autonomous vehicle, you can make trials, but what about the people who don't want to share their data? Even if you install any instrument to track them, GPS, whatever data, let alone the crash, breathalyzer, anything you put on there, it is within their right to refuse it. So that is the biggest challenge in any development of any safe technologies. So for that, I think the lead has to be taken by the automobile industry to how to build into it. In case if they collect the data without information, they will be penalized by law. And it is here only the autonomous vehicle, if they want to crash, how the crash occurs, and how the person behaves within that, or how everything is linked with that only. So data collection has to be, if any, for the improvement of the safety, the agencies responsible, they have to shoulder the responsibility for that. That's it.
2 points on data. One, we have some early data studies that point to a significant potential of autonomous vehicles to reduce fatalities and injuries on the road. It's a potential, so it needs to be tested in much bigger settings than what so far have been mostly driving demonstration zones and some limited real life tests. But we are talking about going from an average of 18.5 accidents per million kilometers in manual driving to about 7.1 accidents in automated driving. So it's a significant reduction, potentially. So let's be aware of that, but this is just the quantitative side of things. There is also, of course, what you mentioned about Philip, a potential for autonomous vehicles to be much slower, which is, on the one hand, a good thing. You would think, because they're much more conservative. Already today, the assisted driving systems are much more conservative when it comes to distance and so speed, but also then, unfortunately, they tend to take longer to get to places, and they tend to take longer routes, interestingly. Well, anyone who used, let's say, Google Maps knows you really need to check on what it's offering you, right? It has its own logic very often. So, of course, any AI assistant has its own logic, but it's learning very fast as well. So this data exists. I won't bore you with numbers on how many kilometers per hour slower these systems are. The second point about data is we don't need to wait for autonomous vehicles to use data much more creatively for the benefits of road users, to improve road safety outcomes. Already today, there are multiple ways, for example, to use data from speed cameras to optimize how streets are organized, to prevent crashes, to identify so-called black spots or red zones where particularly risky behaviors tend to occur, where the speed is maximum and so on. We have many pilots, many projects of that sort. I'm aware of one funded by the Road Safety Fund in Armenia, where it generated a completely new set of solutions by the government based on an AI-powered or machine learning-powered model of data collection from speed cameras. So that exists. We don't need to wait for anything. We need to start using this data. And each government would do well by employing such models in its policy toolkit.
Thank you. Laurent, final word on data.
What I'm in agreement, I'm fully in agreement. When these connected vehicles are between vehicles that are connected to the infrastructure, and this will be a large step forward, a quantum leap in terms of quality, in terms of decreasing fatalities, to avoid also congestions, and to be warned, particularly on a black spot in traffic, it will be able to warn about and send warnings about a driver who is really sustaining fatigue. So these vehicles need to be connected and fully connected to the infrastructure. This is a large project right in front of us, and so work is underway. But and this is going to be so this is the future technology or state-of-the-art technology that's going to be helpful in the future.
Finish, I'd like to give the opportunity for anyone from the floor to ask any questions for our panelists on the topics we've discussed today. Yes, there's one back there. Do we have a microphone, please?
Thanks very much for this rich speeches and discussion. I want to say something. We know that cigarette kills, and we are producing it. We know that the guns and weapons kills, and we are producing it. Cars kills also, and we are developing it and making it intelligence. So don't you see that these three mistakes in our life, that we are investing in mistakes to be intelligent, to be different, but still will kills. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to speak? Mr. El-Hansawi.
The first two ones I agree with you. With the third one, I totally disagree with you. Because mobility is the key for our development, for our employment, for our sustainable growth. We need mobility, yeah? Without mobility, we will not gather together here. So that's just a fact. We need it. Of course, it's more important, even unfortunately, the lives we're losing. But we have the moral obligation to stop this problem, you know. In the academia. So you can imagine how much efforts we are doing to create trends, to find solutions, and to interact with the industry and the regulators to solve these problems. But it's unavoidable. We need mobility. Without mobility, we won't exist. The food will not reach you at home. You need an ambulance to take you to hospital if something happened to you. So we need mobility. It's not something we can just avoid. Cigarettes, we can stop. Guns, we can stop them. But cars, we need mobility. A bicycle, whatever. It's all about, and buses. Yeah.
Pankaj and then Philip.
See, mobility is the key, but your question is about the car. I definitely agree. That is why one of the person is advocating that we should go for the public transport. I think you must agree that we should go for the public transport. So it is not about per se the mobility. It is a balance between the two, and that is the reason we are discussing. We can't avoid cars because it provides the flexibility, personal freedom. It gives you the choices which the human being is craving for. That which public transport will never give you. So we are offering choices, and the regulatory framework is there how to regulate the cars. And different economies are at the different stage of their economic journey are regulating accordingly. If you have a thing in Singapore, the person who have garage, they have an auction system to regulate the number of cars. That can be done, but eliminating the car, I don't think this is the right way of thinking. And same way, the guns, you need guns to protect the society. If you misuse it, just like knife. Knife can be used for cut the fruit. You can use it to murder it. It is upon your wisdom. So point is, there is not like, world is not black and white. You can choose black or white. It's a colorful world. You have to have everything with a different range of offers. How you use it, it's a human and machine interaction. And I think everything, the world is for everyone. If you use it rightly. We have snakes. If you use them, their venom rightly, you can save the life. So it's a moral, it's a big debate, I think. Thank you.
I just think it really does highlight the importance of public awareness about the importance of sustainable urban mobility, in my case. And I think you really do have this option with public transport to get this message across and really engage people. The sector provides mobility for billions of people every single day. It's a captive audience. If you go outside the front, you've got the road safety campaign. We put that in public transport vehicles, bus stops, around cities around the globe. So it's a really effective tool to do that. And I think when we're looking at new technologies, the importance of demonstration projects as well. I mean, some of our bus members have been doing some autonomous bus trials. So people can really get the experience of how it deals with different traffic management situations. And really to alleviate the fears of, that they may have had. But actually the main feedback is that it's going to make public transport smoother, easier, more connected. And it's going to make us want to use it more. So I think you really have this opportunity because we also have the UN Decade of Sustainable Transport coming up in 2026. UN decades are there to raise awareness of solutions and identify policies that work. And I think that goes to exactly your point about having sustainable transport globally. And I think the benefit for the road safety agenda is that, and it was in the Marrakesh Declaration, is that it can help maintain momentum on road safety. But I think the important thing is putting it in the context of sustainable transport. And I think that can really help raise awareness of what those solutions are.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the floor this morning? Yes, one here at the front, please.
Actually, it's not a question, it's a comment. And before I start, I'd like to thank all panelists. Really, we enjoyed the session. We got very rich information. Thank you very much. This session exactly reminded me of a session or a committee meeting I attended in 1994, a TRB committee meeting. We were discussing exactly the same. This is 31 years back. And we still need time to adapt to autonomous vehicle. I don't know if anyone of the attendees were there, but it was exactly the same topic, the same discussion, the same fears. And we need to continue. But we need to go out of this session taking with us some lessons to continue. First of all, we have some quick wins. Public transport is a quick win inside the city. So we need to put more effort on this and more, maybe, budget on this in our cities. The driver assistant is a quick winner. The safety features in the vehicle, it's a quick winners. It's part of the technology. The safety features that we could add to our highway to be a forgivable one, it's a quick win. At the same time, we should keep working on the other side of the coins to reach the autonomous vehicle. But I see major issue with the cybersecurity. Before we go out, we should be careful with the cybersecurity. And we should remind ourselves with the Concorde airplanes. What happened? Everybody was supporting this. But when one crash happened, production of this airplane stopped completely. So if we commit to a full autonomous vehicle and one crash happens, it will be a disaster. So we have to make sure that when we allow it, it's fully safe. And I think we need much more time than the 3 years that already passed to go for it. But I see a lot of enablers that could help us on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone like to provide counter comment to this? No.
It rightly said, it is the right mixture we have to find, the fine balance within the autonomy, the man who is sitting there, the public transport, and the level of security, how much driver can share the responsibility, and the infrastructure. It's a whole system approach, basically. So wherever we find the deficiency, fortunately, since 1994, we are now in a situation that we can talk of improvement of infrastructure. We can talk of autonomy. That's the humanity has gained since then. So we should make use of, as in the opening remarks, we are here to leverage the technology, how to make world safer. So your point is well taken by the panelist, and he's already working on that.
I'll give small comments. So he used to be my professor, and ask him, don't ask me any questions. I know that he's coming always with really tough questions. But reality, it's very, or almost impossible to predict technology over 10 years. That's fact. And we have been talking about self-driving cars since at least 40 years or even 50 years. When we were children, we have been dreaming. And it was, like science fiction, and it's not a science fiction anymore. That's the fact we're getting. But somehow we just underestimate the complexity of this cars because we didn't really understand the complexity of the driving aspect. It's absolutely complex, So you're sitting in the car comfortably, but what's kind of process that's happening in our brain, in our muscles, in our eyes, that's absolutely complex. Even our instinct, it's playing a major role. And then, of course, we are just trying to mimic a human body that's absolutely complex. And how much we know about our brain today, so over 3%, still 97% just black box. I think it is complicated. We underestimated the complexity of the driving, and I think we are day by day we're getting closer. And I hope that with the next meeting we're having better result to satisfy you.
Thank you. Oh, one small comment, please.
Fundamentally, this is a question of thinking about us as humans in the future and our relationship to nature, which we're destroying on a daily basis, including with unsustainable car-driven cities, and with the machine, which is becoming an increasingly important relationship, as we all now acknowledge. So the nature-human-machine interface is much more than autonomous driving question. And it is, in fact, sustainable transport as a whole, imagining our cities very, very differently and our relationships with each other, with machines and nature very differently. This is how we need to inform our choices, because ultimately it's about choosing how we want to live and who we want to live with and how many, years we want to live on this planet.
Thank you, and I think that's a really good way to sum up what we've been talking about this morning. We've been talking about the role of emerging technologies in shaping the future of the transport sector and some of the challenges that are faced in terms of trying to minimize these road safety risks. And I think one of the key things that I take away from this morning's discussion is around the need for collaboration and the fact that this goes beyond just the transport sector. And when we're talking around these connected systems in the future, this is not just about the transport sector, it's around the entirety of the development of cities around the world, and we're increasingly living in bigger cities, and that's only going to get more complex in the future in some of these situations, but it's a real need for collaboration in terms of the development of these regulations and standards to allow these emerging technologies to flourish. So I'd just like to finish by saying a really big thank you to our esteemed panelists this morning for such a rich discussion. I think we've covered some really interesting topics, so a big thank you to each and every one of you, and a round of applause please for our panelists.